Good day, podcast community. Pete Kane here, Podcast Pete, and certified high performance coach. And we have a special guest. We couldn't do it at the expo yesterday. It was the We Care Vet Expo because of noise, bandwidth, and a couple other things. So we got Don to reschedule to this morning, and this is going to be fun. Don and I have the same middle name, so just listen for that. Because I know Don. I've known Don for quite a few years. Don, tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into our podcast.
Well, good morning, Pete. And, since we have a middle name, we can say we're, brothers from another mother, right?
Yes.
Anyway, and it was great to see you at the We Care Fair yesterday. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Yes.
But any case, born and raised in a small textile town in North Carolina. And, as a young man, I remember, not too many opportunities there. So I'll give the really short version here. Decided at 17 to enlist in the military, went into service, spent a little bit more than 9 years. Tomorrow actually is going to mark 39 years since I got out of service.
Ooh, congratulations.
And so in that 39 years, it's been a life journey. Right. It's like adapting to life outside the military, having the highs and lows that, many of us go through in life and just enjoying the ride. And so finding myself here in the Atlanta market and, in an interesting time, I remember when in 85, when somebody was telling me that their enlistment was going to take them to the year 2000, I remember telling the individuals, I said, well, say hello to Buck and Twiggy for me, because there was a TV program on there that Buck Rogers in the 25th century or 21st century, something like that, way back then. And, here we are, 2025. What happened to all that time? So anyway, glad to be here with you today, Pete. And that's basically just a short version. Lots more in between there, lots more in between the binder of the book. But we'll get into all things.
Well, I want to dive into, when you are 17 and you're in a small town and you enlist in the military, what I have found, and as I've had a number of them on my podcast, veterans, is the military service give us a lot of skills. And then we transition into the civilian life. What did you learn besides a lot of the fundamental things that we all appreciate? What was your journey like that prepared you for today in your career?
Well, again, at the time when we're young individuals, when we're 17, 18, 19 years old, we know everything, right? And at least we think we know everything. But really what I learned, I didn't learn until I could look back over that time. Right. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things is you're growing up in a small textile town, the way I was raised, working with my dad, doing hot mop roofing when I was 12, stuff like that. I had already developed a pretty strong work ethic. Mm-hmm. But, it wasn't until I got in the military and started, understanding what it takes for a group, for a team to function. Right. Mm-hmm. Of learning a skill set, developing the discipline, developing the structure that we go through in our military training, both, through our basic training to get our mind or body right and working with the team, and then learning a skill set, and then how we apply collectively, to accomplish a common goal, a goal for the common good, right? To accomplish our objectives. And so for me, military experience gave me the opportunity to not only develop my skill, have that understanding of the discipline and structure, but also taught a lot about leadership, about true, authentic, service-based leadership. Because obviously when we take an oath of office, it's about service. It's about service and upholding, again, we take an oath to the Constitution, but it is about service to others. And so, again, I have to look back over that period of time and think about, collectively, where we're at any point in time is a collection of our overall experiences. And tomorrow we're gonna learn something new, right? We're gonna add to that. We're gonna develop
Mm-hmm.
that. We're gonna evolve. And I want to say something quick about the transition thing. I usually don't use the term transition. I call it civilian reintegration.
Mm-hmm.
Because as veterans, we may shed our uniform, but we don't change who we are. We take everything we've learned, everything we've developed, and integrate that into a civilian life to apply those skill sets to those businesses and activities we get into after service.
I love that. We were talking, I often have conversations just with people in general. And I had a conversation with a gentleman, and he was celebrating his daughter's 16th birthday. And it was funny because he's now has more time on his side than he's had in the years past. But it was like the mindset of at 16 is everything centers around us. And he's been serving in all kinds of capacities like you have. And it's like, how do we get our young people to understand that the world's bigger than yourself, that service allows us to see the world in a different, set of eyes. At 17, did you understand service through growing up with your family, or did the military reinforce it or teach it to you?
Good question. Thinking back on my childhood and how things went. And again, not everybody has a perfect childhood. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it changed the dynamic when my parents separated, stuff like that. But we always had one of the things we used to do as kids is every weekend we went to see our grandparents. It was a standard thing that you did, and we had some good role models back then, quite frankly, our grandparents and what they did and how they served and how they participated in the community. Of course, we used to say we had a drug problem is every Sunday we were drugged to church. And so, you had that spiritual upbringing as well.
I've never heard that.
You never heard that. I had a drug problem. I got drugged to church. But yeah, it instilled some basic things in us. And again, just like every 17-year-old, I don't know if there's a single 17-year-old that didn't rebel a little bit, after they got out of their parents' house and got on their own and maybe got some other influences. Many of us, went that and experienced it and then got out of it. Some of it, unfortunately, stayed on that track. But I think it's, a lot of it's environmental. I mean, just like when I talk about, I'm doing a speech next month on veterans in the American economy, and I'm going to be taking people on a journey from like World War II, and even thinking back about World War II. I've read Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, twice now, and there's some incredible stories in there. But it got me thinking: is had it not been for the Great Depression, would those young men that went off to fight in the Pacific and European theaters, would they have had the same, drive and determination had they not gone through that hardship? Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to today, except for COVID, what kind of real hardships have our young people gone through today? And going back to the church analogy, we're talking about baptism by fire. It's sad that as human beings, it seems like it takes some tragedy or some adversity for us to develop that, that internal drive to really serve and be a part of something. And I was talking to some friends recently where, we don't want anything bad to happen to our children, right? Mm-hmm. But, again, as human species, it seems like it takes something bad to bring us together. So how do we find a way to bring ourselves together without having to have the hardship, this super hardship? Can we do it? I kind of think we can.
Yeah, because you almost have to manufacture the trauma, and trauma is at all different levels. I had a gentleman about a year ago on my podcast, Christian Dorr, and he shared with me, since you have the military service, PTSD. And so as he was talking about it, he said He grew up in a concentration camp at age 5 in Russia. So, not your typical kindergarten experience when you're in a concentration camp. But what he said was, if you replace the D with G, so post traumatic stress growth, he grew more in his time under those kind of circumstances that most 5-year-olds would never, because they never went through it and never had to figure it out, never had to grow. So my question to you is, like, we all know that that's a part of life, is that growth. What in your past with trauma, or things that you found that you grew the most, that you could share with our viewers to get a better perspective of that growth opportunity?
I think a part of it is, we look in our society today and think in terms of how many young people, and again, parents mean well, they want better for their children. But sometimes you have parents that will give and provide for their children without them doing what we did, is earning it, right? We had to work for it. Like, if, we got allowances for if we did our chores. If we didn't do our chores, not only did we not get our allowance, we got punished. Our parents weren't very well off. And so if we wanted money for candies or drinks, or, going to the movies or stuff like that, we had to go earn it. Right. So cutting grass, raking leaves, shoveling snow, running errands for the elderly women in the neighborhood, things of that, we had to learn to earn it. And so I think we've got a lot of individuals who have, felt this sense of entitlement because they've had things given without having to earn it. And so I often go back to the old saying, history is the best teacher, or experience is the best teacher. And the same thing, history, experience is the best teacher. And so, again, just to answer your question, I think a lot of it is how generationally, how we've gone through so many of this, parents thinking they were going to make it better for their children, but actually made it worse. I mean, even Dr. Spock, after so many decades of his ideas about how to raise a child, after about 40 years, he came back at one point and said, you know what, looking back, I was wrong. So, and I think we're suffering some of that today. Not completely. I'm not saying it's 100%, but, by and large, we have a lot of people who, they want something for nothing. And that's not what it's meant to be like. We're supposed to work together in collaboration and help each other out. But we all have to participate, right? We all have to be sharing the effort.
Yeah, no, I want to go back to that question and ask it a different way, but I wanted to share with our viewers. I have a golfing buddy, and when COVID hit, they went to Zoom, and it really, he knew it was going on, not COVID, but he knew how parents in general were pampering and giving too much to their kids to where they couldn't learn. So he saw it in really plain daylight with just Zoom being a part of that routine. He could see how the parents were engaging with the kids. And he would tell me, he goes, it's almost like the lotto generation, where you win the lotto, we know what happens. It's a curse because you didn't earn it and you don't know how to handle it. So it absolutely turns bad. But we have so many people playing the lotto because they want to win the grand prize and never have to work and just do whatever they want to do. But hard work is hard work, and there's nothing given. So my question is with yourself, because our viewers always like to know people that have had a little bit of experience in life, guys like you and me, that what did you go through in your journey? Maybe it's after the military, while you're in the military, that you can pinpoint and share with our viewers that was a time that was tough, but you grew the most. Can you give us a specific time, an example, so our our audience and our community can understand a little bit more about Don's journey?
Well, and I'll be a little, I'll be obviously transparent and share a little bit more. As a kid growing up, again, I mentioned my parents' divorce. I was raised in a domestic household with domestic violence, and knowing what I experienced and how my emotional state from seeing my parents engage in these things was very difficult. So it's got me to a point today where, I've been known as a peacemaker. One of my character traits is being that in a peacemaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that stems from not liking how it is when we fight with each other. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look, we seem to be such an adversarial society. It's got to be your way or my way or whatever. And I try to be more reflective when I talk to people and say, look, you gotta understand where people are coming from and understand there's a truth in the middle, right? So we don't have to be so polarized with each other. But some of that trauma, growing up, helped me experience some of that stuff. Being in the military, having some challenges, had a situation where, I had some, as a brash sergeant in the Air Force, I had a situation where I had an NCO that outranked me by a lot. He was a senior master sergeant. And we had a dispute over damage to an aircraft. And, long story short, I wound up grounding the aircraft. Sometime down the road, it was discovered that because I wouldn't sign off the entry, that it was taken care of because the aircraft wasn't safe, the page disappeared. And so this big brouhaha happened when I got back stateside. This happened overseas. I got back stateside. It was almost where I was facing a Article 15. But long story short, because I stood my ground, my ethics about the work and stuff like that, and they did a little bit more research, it kind of went away, it kind of disappeared. I didn't lose my stripe, in fact, if anything, it kind of gave me a leg up on, they realized that I couldn't be bought. Later on, I went in the civilian work world, and there was some things that weren't really, call it kosher, within the business community. And I've always been the kind of person, if you have your ethics is all you have. At the end of the day, you got to face yourself in the mirror. So I think each of these experiences, even though there's sometimes it resulted in loss of employment, whatnot, again, we all got to look at ourselves in the mirror face. So I think those experiences taught me how to handle things today. So that when I get involved in an environment, it's like the difference between sympathy and empathy. If you've never lost a parent, or you never experienced a hardship, if you only read about it, right, you can provide sympathy to someone, but you can't empathize with them, right? So I think having that experience, I tell people I don't know everything, but in 39 years in post-military life, I've learned a lot. From my days of Eastern Airlines, going through working in aviation, and then moving to Atlanta, going through so many different industries, from manufacturing to healthcare to logistics. It's given me knowledge that I wouldn't have gained otherwise had I not gone through that. And when you said about PTSD, just because somebody has suffered PTSD doesn't mean that they're damaged goods, right? I tell employers, I'm like, look, if someone has gone through a stressful situation and been able to resolve that and come out on the other side, now here is somebody that has additional tool in their toolbox that they can identify others who are exhibiting similar signs and can head off things. Because how many young people do we know that have PTSD today that's never been in the military, right? So it's another tool that we have, because we have experienced those traumatic events, that we can use that experience to help head off other problems from happening. And so it's a great, it's additional asset.
Ooh, that's so good. So I want you to picture your mid-20s, and you're talking to that young Don. What advice would you give him now that you've lived those 39 plus years and, as an adult? What would you share with him that could help him that you know now?
It's good. I'm glad you asked that question. Recently, I wrote a piece and I put on my website called Originality. Sometimes I'm a firm believer God made each of us with unique, innate gifts, right? And oftentimes we want to fit in, right? So we want, and so sometimes what we do, and I've been just as guilty of this myself. Sometimes we don't continue to be who we're meant to be, who God has equipped us to be through those experiences and through those trials and whatnot. So we get in an environment and we try to change, we try to, soften up a little bit. We try to adjust because we want to fit in, right? And it's all part of that. People talk about having a blended culture, right? And I say that for business, I believe that having a blended culture is a death sentence, because let's say that in a business culture, there's levels of complacency or toxicity, or maybe both throughout the organization. Well, if you want people to blend into that, what you're saying is you want somebody coming in with different experience, different skill sets to adapt to that. And you want them to become complacent. You want them to become toxic, right? What I say is we need to evolve, right? So we need to take what gifts we have and help evolve the culture. And so going back to myself personally, I know that in the past, I would sometimes find myself trying to blend in, right? Trying to be part of, get that acceptance kind of thing. And what I've had to learn is, hey, not everybody's going to understand me. Not everybody's going to know where I'm coming from. But I need to stay true to who I am for what I've learned and what I feel I bring to the table, right? And so again, I don't know everything, but I've got a wealth of knowledge because I've had so many people invest in me. And it's because of those people that I often talk about, and authors that I've read and things that I reference when I talk to people. I don't take credit for those things. I tell people where it came from, but I've got to be me. You got to be you, right? And so I find that if we stop trying to be what other people want us to be and just be ourselves, God will show us the path we're meant to be on and what we're meant to do, and how we're meant to make an impact in our communities, in our business, and in our, in our world in general. So
that is so good. Now I'm going to dig a little deeper into what you just shared. I have seen patterns, because we're like in a society where our time is crucial. Everybody's tugging on our time. A lot of distractions out there. Yours has gone from 19 minutes to 9 seconds. If I'm sitting there and I'm an employer and you're in your 20s or 30s, and you know what you know now, what your genius, what the characteristics that make you special and unique to what you do, what would you say, like the three things that are in your genius zone that you do, that you love, that really sets you apart from others out there, because of just so easy to get distracted? Could you share with our community what that might be?
Well, for me, I always equate it. When I go into an environment, I love using, and I often use an etch-a-sketch analogy, right? We all remember, those of us who are old enough to remember what etch-a-sketch is.
Oh, yeah.
We would, turn the dials and draw a little picture, and then we could shake it up, and it would erase it big slate.
Yeah.
Many times I go in an environment, I hear these stories of, oh, this person that, and this person here, and we've done this and we've done that. And so when I go in an environment and I'm charged with leading a team of individuals, that typically the people that came before me might try to plant some seeds and say, oh, well, this person can't do this and this person can't do that, and you got to watch this person for this and this person for that. What I like to do is set the stage and say, look, we're going to have an environment that's an etch-a-sketch. I don't care what's happened in the past. I don't care what kind of rating. Like somebody says, well, this person's not a high performer. Well, how do you know he can't be a high performer? Because you don't know if they've had the right direction and leadership, right? You don't know if they've had the right environment for them to develop who they are and their innate skills, right? So I like to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, look, we're gonna start with a clean slate, and how we build our relationship and how we build ourselves up individually and as a team is going to start from zero, right? And so you get a chance to draw your picture on what that looks like, right? So I think that's the first thing to start with. And then the other thing is companies, a lot of times they spend time training individuals, but they don't take the time to develop individuals, right? So, and the difference is I can teach you how to use a piece of equipment. I can teach you how to run a software program, and I can teach you how to assemble something. But what am I doing for you, right? What am I doing to take and help you, learn and become a better person, be a better communicator, right? Practice that mind, body, spirit connection. What am I doing to help you as an individual to grow, right? And so a lot of companies miss that boat. And as a result, that's why, Gallup poll recently said employee engagement's at 32%. Well, part of that is because companies don't know how to develop people. Another part of it is companies don't understand how to really have a vision or an objective that everybody can get behind. And this is one of the things that happens with us veterans, right? When we're in the military, we're assigned a task, we're assigned a duty. We know our rank structure, all that kind of stuff. We know what our mission objectives are, and we know what our part is. A lot of people working for companies today, I mean, I don't care if it's, you're producing, sodas, or you're doing shipping, or you're manufacturing things, whatever it is, the company does. A lot of their employees don't feel like they're part of something bigger, right? They're part of that mission, that drive, that determination, how they fit in and stuff like that. So there's a lot of lack of vision. And there's a biblical saying, without a vision, the people perish, right? And so just those two things, the personal development and having a clear vision for employees to be part and to increase that engagement, right? And to feel like they're valued, would do so much to increase that employee engagement, which has stayed flat at 32% for about the past 5 or 6 years. They talk about 40% turnover in a lot of industry, and that's horrendous, right? It costs companies a lot of money. Today, I was reading an article on talking about 70% of warehouses are struggling to find talent, keep talent, because it's not an easy job to do. And so with all these statistical numbers and struggles in business and going back to that 32% engagement, they say that's a loss of, estimated to be a loss of $9 trillion in productivity. That's huge. That's huge.
Oh, yeah.
But yet every day we keep going through the same thing. But anyway, those two things are the ways that I think we turn the tide on that. Right.
Man, that is so good. I totally agree with both of those. And I think as we're getting into some rapid changing that's coming up, whether it's AI, whether it's just all the things that are going on with technology and change, adapting to that change is so critical. And I think the same way you do when it comes to that. You engage a person by really developing them. If they're developing, they're growing, they're more interested in their future. And you're right, without a vision, you perish. And I think we fail to set that vision by igniting or having that person develop themselves. As we wind down, like, share with our viewers, like, what is your philosophy on growth? Do you look for books, tapes, podcasts, combination of both? But give us an idea how Don grows each day or on a continuous basis.
Well, books are certainly helpful, books and articles and things of that nature. are great. But, for me, I think it's just observing and listening. When I talk about having a conversation, it's not being the speaker in a conversation, but sitting down and asking and seeking where other people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Because a big part of that, and again, I love, scriptures. We know that Christ talked in parables a lot of times, and I'll use a lot of analogies so that people can kind of understand a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more about my philosophy, where I come from. But basically, it's like if I'm gonna give directions to my house to 5 different people, what do you think is the first thing that I have to know before I give directions to those 5 people?
Are they listening? I
Where are they
mean,
coming from? Where are they coming
yeah,
from?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
If I
true.
don't
Yeah.
know if I don't know where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can I conceivably, even if I'm going to give them a vision, which is the destination I want them to get to, my address, I can't help them create their pathway and their journey to get to that vision unless I know where they're coming from.
Yes.
So I often use the aspect. Steve Covey said, I think it's probably 50, 60 years ago that he penned this. And it's a great thing, even though it's old school, it's very relevant today. Even with all you mentioned about AI, seek first to understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't jump to a conclusion until you know where that person's come from, right? Because you're not going to be able to help them. You're not going to be able to provide the direction, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to help determine that path for that individual until you know where they're at.
That is so wise. Thank you for that. So I have one more question, but I want you to tell our viewers, how can they get a hold of Don?
Well, a number of different ways. You've got my phone number up there on the screen. They can also reach out, go to, connect with me on my website, www.longinsights, that's insights with an S, LLC.com, or they can email me at donedward@longinsightsllc.com. Either one of those 3 ways, hey, pick up the phone. And I always tell people, look, a conversation over coffee doesn't cost anything but the cup of coffee, right? And I'll pay for it. Right? So, all it takes is time. Sit down, have a conversation. Let's see where the conversation goes, right?
That's so good. And then his contact phone number is 770-377-4569 for our audio listeners that are driving down the road. They want to go, I got to get a hold of this guy. So thank you for that. So Don, what would you say? What would be the one thing you would want our viewers to take home from our time on this podcast?
You're going to put me in that curly mode with City Slickers, right? What's that one thing, right? Let's be real, be original, and take time to understand, build that relationship with the individual, right? And just understand we're not meant to be solo act. There's no such thing as a that we say a self-made person, self-made man. Yep. Look, we're meant to be in community with one another. Don't ever try to go solo. I would say most out, build your community, build your tribe, whatever you want to call it. Build those relationships, whatever, and don't think you can go it alone. I mean, even Elon Musk and those people that are very successful, if you look at them, they have great teams. That's why I tell people every time I watch a SpaceX launch, I don't look at the rocket. I look at the faces of the people at SpaceX there in Hawthorne, their reactions to what's going on. And because they're the people behind all that happening, right? So it always takes a team, always takes a group to make stuff happen.
I love it. Together we're better. And that is so wise to share with our community and encourage our listeners. Share this with people one, that want to get to know Don, 2, want to be able to access his skills, because we're in a rapidly changing world and you got to know where people are. if you're going to set that vision of the future. So that's wise advice. And thank you, Don. I want to invite you back because I feel like this was like 5 minutes and it flew by. So if you'll agree, and I'm going to put you on the spot to be a guest again, we'll get you in and we'll dig deeper into really how you can serve our community by sharing your journey and what you bring and be able to learn and teach our community so much. So thank you so much, Don, for your time on this podcast on this early Wednesday morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Pete, and thanks for what you're doing in your podcast and whatnot, and just bringing to light so many things in our society that we need to be having discussions on today. So thank you for what you're doing, and thanks for the opportunity to be here.
I want to steal a line from Chick-fil-A. My pleasure.